Welcome to Magnificent Living Today. Are you living a life of optimal health? Do you want to make changes in your life? Do you need help setting and achieving goals? Are you ready to reform and reshape your mind, body, and spirit? Are you looking for more balance in your life? Many of us are thinking about starting a better lifestyle program, both for ourselves and or our family. We all know how difficult it can be to motivate others when we ourselves are not motivated. Sometimes we all need a little help reaching our goals. And that's why Magnificent Living today is here for you.
Welcome to Magnificent Living Today. I'm your host, Carl Powell. Today we're going to talk about a very serious subject. We're going to talk about being mindful, not to be mindless. So we're going to talk about racism and the old negative thought patterns that we have that stay in our head. And I have a special guest. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. We're going to have a really exciting show today. I look forward to it.
I was raised to believe that excellence is the best deterrent to racism or sexism. And that's how I operate my life. Oprah Winfrey.
Welcome back to Magnificent Living Today. I'm your host, Carl Powell, and I'm going to start where I always start, with Mr. Motivator. And Mr. Motivator is about being mindful, not to be mindless. And there are oftentimes we have thoughts in our head that just don't make any sense, but we just don't take the time to examine the thought. The example that I'm going to use is the umbrella story. I always tell the umbrella story. When I was a little kid, my mother used to always say, don't put an umbrella up in the house, because if you do, you're going to put someone's eye out. And probably up until the time I was 30, I refused to use an umbrella. I would get a hood and I would put it on because I was so afraid of getting my eye put out, and I would always be ducking, every time I saw somebody with an umbrella. And one day I just had to stop and think to myself, how many people do I know with one eye? So it wasn't like there was an epidemic of people getting their eyes put out with umbrellas. It was just something that my mother said to control us in the house. So oftentimes I find that whenever I have a thought, I had to go back and I think, why did I really think that way? Why did I really say that? Another example, I love this one, is I went to Switzerland and I was doing a conference and I said to the people, is there anyone in here who can yodel? And somebody asked me, well, do you like fried chicken? And I was like, oops, because not everyone yodels into the Alps, but we know Swiss Miss, that's all we know about Switzerland. So that's where I was coming from, but I realized that I also had places where I needed to re-examine my thoughts. So I'm going to ask Jennifer and Oliver, welcome.
Welcome, thank you.
To share some of your life experiences and thoughts with me. We'll start with you, Jennifer.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting story about yodeling in Switzerland, because I think a lot of times we don't realize that we have certain beliefs, and, not that we're coming from a place or trying to be racist, but, we do have some prejudices, all of us, and that, goes through all different elements of our lives. So that's important to be mindful. One thing I can remember is in my work with a client, I know that she had a hard time with her self-esteem. And one of the things that she struggled with, Carl and Oliver, is that growing up, she was told that she was ugly all the time. So she had a particular family member who would always come to her, and that's how she would greet her. Hello, ugly. How are you doing, ugly? Those kinds of things. And so that is what she heard all the time, and that's what she believed about herself. Now, this was a beautiful, beautiful young woman that I could see and others could see. And it was interesting when I started working with her, because everybody could see how beautiful she was, and they would even tell her, but she didn't see that for herself. And so when we started working together and we got, we started digging through, okay, why is it that you feel this way about yourself? We realized that, oh my gosh, it goes all the way back to when, my aunt told me that I was ugly. And so the way I started working with her is we had to really start taking that tape out and putting in new beliefs and new thoughts that, I am a beautiful young woman, I do look good, I feel good, things of that nature. And that didn't come easy. I mean, after you've been hearing that tape in your mind for so long that I'm ugly, trying to say I'm beautiful, going to the opposite side of the spectrum is often difficult. But it's just little by little trying to chip away. One of my favorite quotes is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's how we tackle with trying to erase those limiting beliefs and trying to get those thoughts out of it. One thought at a time, turning it around.
Oliver, I ask you to be here today because it's interesting to me because we all have grown up in different generations. But Oliver and I have come from a point from where we were, first we were colored. I mean, then we were Negroes. Or Negroes and colored were just about equal. And then we went to being black. Then we became African American. So throughout that experience, we've always been labeled. And I just wanted to know how that label affected your life or situations.
Well, you talked about the umbrella, Carl, and mine was watermelon. I grew up with this image in my head, hearing people talk about blacks eating watermelon. And for quite a while in my life, I didn't eat watermelon.
Me either.
Not because I didn't like it, but because I could always conjure up this image of the little black boy with a watermelon rind in his mouth.
Right.
Then I said, why am I doing this to myself? I'm not eating one of the most tasteful fruits in the world. And so I started eating watermelon. But you do get these things from a very small age. And when you hear them, and as you hear them year after year, time after time, they stick in your head. And so, as you said, you have to be mindful instead of mindless and say, this has nothing to do with me as a person, as a black person or anything,
And being mindful, it's very hard sometimes because we all have those little seeds that were planted a long time ago, and they grow into trees in our brain, and it's hard to chop those trees down. And life, for me, traveling abroad was one of the most amazing experiences, and it was because I had to break through some of my own little thoughts that I had in my head. The first time I went to Holland, I remember I was so excited, and I wanted to get a windmill, and I wanted to get some of those wooden shoes. So I went to the store and I got a pair of those wooden shoes and I put them on, and I'm walking down the street in these wooden shoes, clunk, clunk, and finally somebody stopped me and they said, those are decorations, you're not really supposed to wear them. But, who knew that? I heard Holland, I heard wooden shoes, that's what I remember. I remember when I was a little kid, the only thing I knew about Holland was my father had a hardware store and he sold a paint. It was called Dutch Boy Paint. And the little Dutch boy had those little wooden shoes on. And that was the only thing I knew about Holland. So when I got there, immediately I had to get those wooden shoes. But travel also teaches you when you make the big mistake. Like there's a yodeling. I went to Africa, to South Africa, and I was the first black person to do the keynote speech at the Reebok conference. And I was so excited. And when they told me I was going to South Africa, I wondered how the South African people were going to see me. Were they going to see me as a threat, someone who thought I was better than they were? Were they going to be unkind or unpleasant? Boy, what a trip. I mean, it really just changed my perspective of life. My first day, I made the biggest mistake of all. My keynote speech, I started off, and I think I'll start it off with a joke. This will be really funny. I said, my whole life people have been telling me to go back to Africa, so now I'm finally here. And nobody laughed. And I thought, oops. Because they don't have that perception. They don't know why I said that. And the truth was, that was just something that was eating at me, and it just came out, and I was trying to make it funny, but the truth was, it wasn't really funny, even to myself it wasn't funny. And I think that as I've gone through experiences and been different places and experienced people, I always say for young black men, very important to leave this country and go to other places where people don't see you the same way. Germany, for example, was wonderful for me because everywhere I went, and I started traveling like in the late 80s, and everywhere I went, people would look and they would stare and they would want to touch you and talk to you, and you were American and you were cool. And as I learned German, that was even more fun because then I would understand what people were saying about me. While I was standing in line at the store one day, a little girl looked and pointed, and her mother said, "Don't worry, he's made of chocolate." But she said it in German, so when I started to laugh, You know, I had to laugh at that because it really was funny because she wasn't trying to be ignorant. She was trying the best way she could to explain. And so what I did is I explained to him in German that no, I'm a black man and I'm from the United States, so I'm from a different country. And she was embarrassed. And I said, no, 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 don't be embarrassed because we all have those places where we're not as strong in our thoughts. And so when you have a thought like that, I challenge people to think about why it happened. Because we're taught to either ignore it, pretend like I didn't think that, or just kind of shove it under the couch and don't think about why did I think that. I was telling Oliver yesterday that I was going to open a yoga studio with a friend, a white lady, in Baltimore. And we were in Baltimore, we were in a not great area, and we're sitting at the red light, and a black guy bangs on the side of the car. And she shrieks back and she says, oh my goodness, I'm going to be raped by a black man in a do-rag.
Oh my gosh.
And then she looked at me and realized who I was, and she was so embarrassed. And for the rest of the day, she kept saying it over and over and over and over again. And I kept saying to her, to make a mistake is nothing unless you continue to relive it. And I said, don't relive it, examine it. Examine why did you think that, and then maybe that's going to help you further on down the road.
Yeah, that's really the key, Carl, when we find that we do have certain beliefs, is really the time to shine a spotlight on it, really dig it up and go back, trace it back to see where it came from. Like you said, Oliver, there's no need for me to not enjoy watermelon just because of that stereotype. You know, if I would like to eat fried chicken, you know, I can do that. I mean, I'm not putting myself in that box. And really just examining to see, okay, does this belief serve me anymore? Is this the way I want to lead my life, thinking these thoughts? And if it's not, what can I do to change that around? How can I think a different thought? What's a different thought that will empower me, that will enlighten someone else? And how can I move forward, you know, in that direction? But certainly, yeah, don't be ashamed of it, but let's examine it. Let's see what it's about.
You know, our perception can get us into a whole lot of trouble sometimes, you know. We perceive a certain thing. Like I used to have a bad habit in reading. If I bought a novel, I would look at the end page first.
You want to know how the story ends.
If it didn't end the way I wanted it to end, 9 times out of 10, I wouldn't read it. And sometimes we do people that way. You know, we look at a person and we look past the merit of this person. We look past the goodness of this person. And we only see what we want to see. And sometimes you pass up some very good friendships like that. I have a friend, his name is Carl, but his name starts with a K instead of a C. We have nothing in common. He's white, I'm black. He's German, I'm black. He's very anal, and I throw things all over the place, you know. He's Republican, and I'm Democrat. But we're like brothers. I know that he would, I believe this, I believe that he would die for me. When I went through my operation for cancer, he and his wife was there at 6 o'clock in the morning with Ernestine and sat all day. But we don't look at each other as Republican, as black, as anal, those kind of things. We look at the things that we admire and trust and respect about each other. That's where our friendship comes, not from these perceptions that people have of each other. Oh, well, he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, and we can never come together. We don't even talk about those things because our friendship is not predicated on those things.
Correct.
So,
Oliver, how were you able to, you know, look past those labels and see your friend Carl for who he is? Because I find like a lot of people, they're not able to do that as easily because they do only see black or white or Republican and Democrat. How were you able to, in a sense, have those blinders where you can say, you know what, this is another human being who, like you said, is like a brother to you, who might give his life for you?
well, first of all, I've heard you say that in your family there was such a loving relationship there that led you to pretty much be the person you are. Well, I was never taught race, even though I was discriminated against. I was never taught racism. I was taught to respect a person for who they were. And so that's what I try to do. Take a person as he is, or she is, and go from there. Not get these, as I said, these preconceived notions of what you think a person's going to be. Because I can't look at you this moment and tell what kind of person you're going to be the next moment. I can guess, and sometimes I'm right. But you have to give a person a chance to be who they are. And sometimes they're not always the person you want them to be. But you have to look within yourself and say, well, okay, am I the kind of person that he or she wants me to be? Am I the kind of person that they want for a friend? And when you can get past those kinds of notions and take a person as they are, you know, I can't live your life. You can't live my life. I can't live your life. We have to live our own life. A friend allows you to be who you are. A friend also tells you who you are. I'm not going to allow you, if we were at a party, I'm not going to allow you to make a fool of yourself and not say, Jennifer, you're making a fool of yourself. Cool down. You know? And I think that's what friendship is all about, and that's how you have to be with people. You have to be real.
Yes.
I'm about to take a break. Before I go out, you have to tell the story about the watch. You told me yesterday about when you and Carl went to get your watch fixed.
Oh. Well, I had practiced this watch, and we were in Ocean City, and I wanted to get a new battery for this watch. Well, we went into this exclusive jewelry store, and there was one watch that looked exactly like this one. $1,700. And so Carl is tall and got silver gray hair, white, and here I am. And we're standing there at the counter. He's kind of adjacent of me, and the lady looked at us and says, "Are you two together?" I said, "Well, it's all according to what you mean as together. We are with each other, but we're not together as you mean it. We're friends." And she had to stop and smile because she knew what I meant, and that I knew what she meant. But, you know, it was another perception. Sometimes two men can't be together without people perceiving, you know, other things that other than just friendship. Sometimes two, especially in this day and age, two women can't be together. Oh, something's going on.
Oprah and Gail. Okay, this is a really hot topic, so we're going to take a little break here, and we'll be back because we have a lot more to talk about. Don't go anywhere.
I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Welcome back to Magnificent Living Today. And again, we're here and we're talking about just being mindful, not to be mindless. I want to talk a little bit about my growing up experience because I think that if people stopped and thought about the things that they said to children, that we wouldn't have the problems that we have going on in our society and in our generation. I remember the first time I ever experienced racism, I went to one of my white friends' homes to have dinner, and I must have been 8 years old. And I was so excited. I'd never been to anyone's white's house for dinner before. And I got there, and we sat down at the dinner table, and when I tell you they were broke down poor, we were poor, but they were broke down poor. I mean, you know, so I wasn't really that much of a privilege for me to be in their home. And they served dinner, and the mother taps the father, and she says, "Make sure you mark what silverware he uses so we can sterilize it." And to her, that was a joke. But to an 8-year-old, I was crushed. Just really, I did not understand why would she say that.
Did you know what that meant?
I didn't really get it, but I knew that I had been insulted.
Okay.
Yeah. And I grew up in a little farm town in Pennsylvania where there were only 5 black kids in my graduating class, and I think together there were, 120 people in my graduating class. And so as I went through school, because we were only 5% black at our school, because they weren't allowed to use the N-word, the kids decided that they would just use Tyrone. So you'd walk down the hall and people would scream, Tyrone! Like, all the time at you. And we literally had to go into the office as a group of black people, kids, and say we're tired of them calling us Tyrone. And we actually developed a African American culture club when I was in the 11th grade, and we had our first black teacher. And she pulled me aside and told me something that I will never, ever forget. A bunch of kids were teasing me, and I was the only black kid in class, and she pulled me aside and she said, Carl, you have something in you that is very special that none of these kids will ever understand. And she said, so don't even trip on what's happening right now, because you have a bright future ahead of you. And her name was Connie Hall. If you ever see this, thank you so much. But I just had no idea what I had inside of me because I'd been beat down for so long. I was always made the exception to the rule. I was in a meeting with 10 people once, and the person sitting across from me said, well, you're not like other black people. And up until that point in my life, I'd heard that a lot of times from a lot of different people, and I always accepted that as a compliment. But at that very minute, I just thought, my mother's black. Wait a minute. So what, I'm not like my mother. She's not good enough to be in this room, but I am. And sometimes we listen to those things, we hear those things, and sometimes what people seemingly mean as a compliment is actually very, very, very insulting. And I think as adults, my goal is when something comes out of someone's mouth like that, I stop immediately and I say, this is what you just said to me. Is that what you really meant? Because I'd rather not be mad at you. But you can't help but notice the differences. My very, very best friend, lifelong, Claudia is her name, and we've worked together for years and years. We've traveled the world together. We've done everything together. And she was here visiting me, and we were walking on my little walking trail. And normally when I walk on the walking trail, everyone says hello. And you see your share of black people and you see your share of white people, but whenever I'm walking by myself, everyone says hello. She and I were together, and everyone gave her a dirty look. The white people gave her a dirty look. The black people gave her a dirty look. White people were giving me dirty looks. Black people were giving me dirty looks. And I thought, this is so strange, because I do this walk every day, and it's always a joy for me because everyone says hello. But everyone just perceived that we were together, and it obviously had bothered some people or brought up some things for people. Yeah, so it's just interesting when you see it actually in action. I was in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was with Donna Richardson Joyner and another friend of mine, Charles, a black guy. And I had never been to Nashville before. I didn't know anything about the area or where to go. And we walk into a restaurant. Nice restaurant. We sit down. We're dressed up nice. And we sit there. And we notice that people are going around other tables and they're waiting on other tables. We sat there for 45 minutes. No one ever came to our table. So we just stood up and walked out. But you leave those experiences, and you can either leave them angry, like all white people are this way and I'm so mad, but I just have to realize that it's the ignorance of the person or the people in that situation. It's not to any color or any group. I mean, I feel sorry for anyone who wears a turban these days, because you have a turban on, and immediately people have a preconceived notion that you're a friend of Osama bin Laden and you're going to blow something up.
Yeah, you're automatically judged.
Right. Yeah. And I think for those people, I think that we really have to be mindful, stop, pause, take that breath and think, okay, this guy's been my neighbor for 3 years, and I've never seen him with a bomb, but just because he has a turban on, now all of a sudden I think he's a terrorist. It's just not the truth.
Right. You bring up an interesting point, Carl, because I think a lot of time, at least from a black person's perspective, when you think of racism, you think of, okay, black versus white. But there are a lot of times when other black people, as you mentioned, would be racist towards you.
Right.
Growing up in school, I can recall being the only, black girl in the class. There might have been another, black boy, but I was like continually like the only black girl in my class. And I remember one incident in the schoolyard where this other black boy approached me, and he actually picked up some dirt and put it on me and said something to the effect of, you know, you're really black. You need to start acting like, you know, you're black. You need to act like you're kind. As if I was acting, you know, too white, or I wasn't black enough, you know, the person who I was. And that was really, I must have been about 12 years old at the time, and that was really difficult for me, because it was like, you know, this is me. I'm being who I am, and who are you to say that I'm not being, you know, black enough for you? What is black enough? I mean, and that certainly brought up a whole, you know, new discussion with my parents, and, you know, they empowered me and just instilled in me to be the person I am, you know, that you know, the color of my skin isn't going to change who I am inside, and that there's nothing wrong with me. I'm, you know, I'm Jennifer. I'm just, you know, I'm born African American. I'm very proud of that. You know, there's, just because I'm smart, just because I talk a certain way, doesn't mean I'm less black than anyone else. So it's just interesting to see how, you know, certain experiences that you have not only come from the person that you think would be opposing you, but the person who's supposedly, quote unquote, your brother.
Right. I've never run into a situation like that, but my daughter has. Would have to go to school quite often because of kids picking on her, because she was always an achiever. She was always studying, and she wanted to better herself. And they would come to her and abuse her and tell her she's trying to be white because she wanted to get an education, because she wanted to, you know, to better herself. I think probably the first time that I really ran into blatant racism, because I went into service when I was very young. I went into service when I was 16. So I didn't, and I lived in Detroit, so, you know, you get remarks, but you didn't get the blatant discrimination. But this particular time, I had been to Korea, returned to the States, and I was in Fort Riley, Kansas. And one morning, the first sergeant came in and says, I want you to pick someone else. You got to go to Texas to pick up a prisoner. Well, I was happy, man, get away, going to Texas and so on. And so he and I picked another guy. Well, Saunders, you could not tell whether he was white or black until he opened his mouth. Then you knew. But we go to Fort Hood, Texas. We get there at night, and so the provost marshal says, well, we can't release him tonight, come in the morning. Well, when we got there in the morning, they bring this guy out, and he's white. And I look at Saunders, he looks at me, and he says, how did this happen? But anyway, the guy was really nice. We get on the train, and he says, do you have to handcuff me? He says, I'm not going anywhere. I'm broke. I've spent all my money. He says, no, you know, just sit there. So we made a stop in somewhere in Texas, got off at this little restaurant. We go in to get something to eat. Now, we've got guns all over us. The girl says, we can serve him, but we cannot serve you. There's a place in the back if you want to eat, around the side. And I got so angry. I wanted to shoot up. I literally wanted to shoot up the place. And the guy stepped up, and he said, ma'am, I'm a prisoner, and I'm not going around the back to eat. He says, if you don't serve these people and me, we're going to have a whole lot of trouble here. So she went and got her manager, I guess somebody from the back, and grudgingly he served us. But that was probably one of the first times that I ran into blatant discrimination.
Yeah, and discrimination, it comes packaged differently.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes packaged as a compliment. Sometimes it comes packaged as a straight out insult. And I think that mostly
Sometimes it's hidden.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not. It's very subtle.
Yeah.
And that's the worst, the subtle. Because I would rather you not like me and just tell me you don't like me.
Right.
You know, don't pretend like you like me. Don't be in my face and be my friend, and then all of a
Please.
sudden go behind my back and say, well, he's this and he's that and he's the other thing. And I remember the very first time that my first reality of it's time for people to stand up for themselves was when Harvey Milk got killed. I watched and I saw gay people for the first time in my life fight back. And they were turning the police cars over and they were going nuts. And what always had bothered me, I have a brother who's a transvestite, and when he would be out and people would scream faggot out of the door. And I'd always think, is that necessary? Is it necessary to go that far to make somebody feel that bad about themselves? And then I would hear horrible stories about gay bashing, where my friends were getting beat up, or one eye put out, or my favorite example. But just things that happened, and that was the first time that I ever saw gay people fight back. And I got on a bus like 2 days later. I said, if people are there and they're fighting for their rights, I'm going there, and I want to go where people are going to fight back. And from the very first day that I got off that bus, I found a place where I could volunteer, and I've been volunteering and showing up ever since. Because I think it's so important that we become the educator, because most things come from ignorance. It comes from not understanding or not being exposed to.
Yes.
I lived in a very white world for a very long time, because in the fitness world, I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but every fitness product, if you see a fitness show, it's a white person. And I was in that business, and I was the exception to the rule. But like Oprah said, the only thing that I could do was be better than they were. I had to be absolutely better than they were. And that was the only way that I could stay there. But after a while, I started to notice that it was really hurting me more than it was helping me. And I remember
How so?
the International Dance Exercise Association, they have Instructor of the Year. And for the first 10 years, I wanted to be Instructor of the Year so bad. I traveled, I worked, I knew that I at least should have been nominated. But to my knowledge, to this day, and this is probably their 30 years anniversary in business, they've never had a black Instructor of the Year. And that's the reason why I stepped back from the fitness industry and really got into the mind-body work, because I couldn't take the heat. I didn't like being the only black person at the convention. I didn't like that everyone around me, I was the exception to the rule. And I remember the first time that I ever felt black for real was I went on the Tom Joyner cruise the first time. And it's funny, when they called and asked me to go, I was thinking, do I really want to be on a boat full of black people for, 3,000 black people for a whole week? Because I had some bad perceived notions. And I got on that ship, and that was the best time that I've ever had. I mean, literally, I did every single thing you could do the whole week.
You needed a vacation after you came back.
I came back. My mother had to pick me up like this from the airport and just carry me home. But I remember it was white night, and I was looking over the balcony down onto the promenade, and I saw all of these black people of all different colors, all in white. And I thought, I'm a part of that. That's a part of me. And it was a part of me I denied, because I'd lived in a world where I just I'd never seen 3,000 black people who weren't fighting or screaming or yelling or had guns, because I watched television too. And so I have the same perceived notions that everyone else has, because we were watching a horror film. One of my best friends came to visit, and we were watching a horror film, and there was a black guy in the film. And she looked at me and she said, he's going to be the first to go. and as sure as I'm sitting here, we watched it, and his boat started to fill up with water. The monster was coming to get him. And she said, watch, what they're going to do is they're going to let him get all the way back out, and then all the way back to the boat before whatever monster was in the sea was going to. Sure enough, he got out. He got right back to the boat, hands on the boat, and then you see him just get eaten up. And I thought, isn't that funny how? But if you watch enough horror films, you really do.
That's the formula.
Yeah, right. But we have to learn how to break those formulas in our head.
Yeah.
I think probably one of the best ways to do that is I know when I was a very young man,
Mm.
you know, I went on just feeling and emotion.
Mm.
But as I grow older and got more spiritual,
Mm.
I know that you have to bring a divine feeling
Mm-hmm.
into yourself.
Right.
To not to be the judge of somebody else.
Right.
It's not your call. It's not my call to judge you. It's not my call to judge you. I may not approve of what you're doing. I may not approve of your lifestyle. I may not approve the way you go about living your life. But it's not my call to judge you. Whether you call him God, whether you call it a higher power, that's when you will be judged, not from me. Because if I judge you, somebody eventually is going to judge me. And it may be an unfair judgment. And I can't judge you and be fair in my judgment because I'm not you. So I do think you have to develop that spiritual point of view. Is that, you know, am I my brother's keeper? Maybe I am. I don't know. There are some brothers that I do tend to look after a little more than others, but am I truly my brother's keeper? I'm still working on that.
You know, I agree with what you say, Oliver, because it's so important to know that divine being inside of yourself so that you can look at another person and, without seeing the outer, really go to the core of who they are, and that's the inner. And I love, you know, the saying in yoga when we say namaste, because it means the divine in me salutes the divine in you.
Right.
And that's how I attempt to live, you know, without seeing so much the outer of that person, but really seeing the divine in them and loving them, you know, even before I know them, not bringing into those, you know, buying into those prejudices and having those preconceived notions and really attempting to get to know that person. Now, like you said, I may not understand what you do, I may not agree with what you're doing, I may not agree with your lifestyle, so on and so forth, but I'm not going to judge you for living your life the way you choose to live it. I don't walk in your shoes, I don't know your experiences, I don't come from your backgrounds, and so who am I to do such a thing? I'm going to love you for you. I'm going to be a friend. In order to have a friend, I need to be a friend. And so I would want my friend to accept me for who I am. And so in turn, I'm going to accept you for exactly who you are and love you for who you are.
Right. And sometimes prejudices come from jealousy. I can't be the expert in relationships that you are because you went to college, you gained that knowledge. But I'm jealous of you. I'm jealous of you because you're a step higher than me. And so...
But you have so much wisdom and experience. You've been married for 43 years.
But my point is, I can't say, well, she doesn't know what she's doing because you have the papers and the experience to show that you know what you're doing. So I find something else. I find a lifestyle. I find a color. I find a way that you're doing things. And I substitute that for my real reason of rejecting you. You know, I can't bend my foot all the way up to my head like you.
But you're trying.
So I invent some other reason not to like you.
Yeah.
You know.
That
So
makes
that's the point I'm trying to make. And sometimes it's not so much that you dislike the person because of his skin or whether it's you dislike this person because they are a little above you in the job or the way their money situation, their economic situation. You know.
Well, I think this is another time to take a break because I really want to touch on politics a little bit when we come back. It's something we can't ignore. That's a hot topic that's out there. We're going to take a little break. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back.
Let's be very honest about what this is about. It's not about bashing Democrats. It's not about taxes. They have no idea what the Boston Tea Party was about. They don't know their history at all. This is about hating a black man in the White House. This is racism, straight up. Janine Garofalo.
Welcome back to Magnificent Living Today. And again, I'm Carl Powell, and I'm here with Oliver and Jennifer. And we're talking about racism and mindfulness and being mindless sometimes. And the White House, for me, I said it was going to be a cold day before I ever saw a black man in the White House. And I was a Hillary person. From the very beginning, I liked Hillary. I didn't know who Barack Obama was. And I remember I went to Miami, and I was visiting Tom Joyner and his wife, and we went out and we had dinner. And Tom said to me, you know, who are you going to vote for? And I said, Hillary. And boy, did he give me the look. He's like, are you kidding me? You know, imagine the possibility. And I had never imagined the possibility, so I just never even really looked at Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. So when I went home, I was forced to go home, re-examine what I thought, and then watch this man. And I started to watch the man, and I forgot about what color he was completely. And I just loved his sense of cool. I just loved his swagger. I just liked that he could just go in and he could talk his way through any situation. It had nothing to do with the color of his skin. I liked the man. And that's why I voted for the man, because I liked him. And then I thought to myself, and I was talking to my aunt, who is always the devil's advocate for me. And I said, this is going to be a really great thing to have a black president. And she said, I don't think so. She said, I don't think it's the right time. And I was extremely confused. And I sat back and, you know, thought about it, and I couldn't find my way through why she would think it would be a terrible thing. But then he got elected. And then the Republicans decided to do this. We're going to sit on our hands, and we're not going to help him at all. We're just going to let him fail as many times in as many ways as we can, and say as many things as we want to. And I am not an angry black man. Many of my clients are white. Many of my friends are white. I don't have any of those feelings whatsoever. But I can't help but notice the truth. The whole birth thing, you know, was Barack Obama really born in the United States? I was teaching my Pilates class one morning, and I had watched the news before I went to work, which I no longer watch the news. It's been almost 6 months. I stopped watching the news because I found out it was giving me high blood pressure.
They'll do that to you.
It was. It really was. I was just angry all the time. And I saw the whole thing with Donald Trump, and he was saying Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States and blah, 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 going on. And then I go to work, and I'm angry. And I have all white people in my class. And I just blurt out, you know, I can't believe this whole thing with birthing. I said, if he was a white president, and no other president that I know in the history of my life has ever been challenged or judged that way. And one of my clients said, oh, I don't believe so. And I had to pause, because I had to realize that I was taking what I was feeling and projecting it into, you know, my work.
She's saying I don't believe so what?
She didn't believe that that was the reason why they were questioning where he was born, was because he was black.
Okay.
And I had to stop and I had to pause and I had to really, really think about it. And I thought, you know, maybe it wasn't. And I can't always jump to conclusions like that, but it's easy to do when we're living in this atmosphere of we're going to sit on our hands and do nothing. Because what breaks my heart is the health care bill could have really helped people. And there are people out there dying, people who need their medication, people out there who just, I mean, the guy who robbed the bank for $1 to get health care. There are people out there, and health care is a very serious issue. But I can't see anyone, human, I don't care if you're black, white, green, blue, anyone who's human, who could sit there and watch Mary die because she has cancer and she can't get the coverage that she needs because she had cancer before she got her health care. Mm-hmm. But that happens. And those are the things that bother me about the Republicans or even the Democrats sitting on their hands and doing nothing. Because I think in this country, we're old enough, we're evolved enough, we should know that we're just all the same. And we need to learn how to take care of each other and stop separating ourselves into groups.
Yeah, it's not you versus me, us versus them.
Right. I remember the very first, Sly and the Family Stone had a song called United We Stand, Divided We Fall. And it's just the truth. We have to learn how to be the United States of America, and being united means that we have to start fighting against each other. We have to start fighting the Mexicans. You know, the whole thing with Border Patrol, it's a problem, but you can't be angry with people. You know, you can't be angry with black people. You can't be angry with gay people. You can't be angry with, I can't be angry with the Republicans. I just can't allow that to get into my spirit, because then it affects me. And then anyone who, they'll pull you back to their level anytime that they can. And that's the reason I always say I don't scream and yell. Because when someone starts to scream and yell, all they really want to do is take you up to their level, you know, or they'll bring you down to their level. And I've just learned that I say what I think, and often I have to go back and re-examine myself. And I think that that's what mindfulness is, because we're not always going to be perfect. There's not going to be a day when we say something and you think, darn, I wish I wouldn't have said that. But going home and taking that time to get quiet, sit with yourself, think about your thoughts of the day. Think about why this happened. You know, when we were in the restaurant in Nashville, we could have raised all heck in the restaurant, but we chose to take the high road and just walk out. There was another restaurant that we could go to. And we didn't carry it for the rest of the evening.
But like you said, Carl, in truth, there has been no other president that's been attacked like this president. Now, there has been hated presidents in office, but they were not attacked like this person is being attacked. There's no other family that's been in the White House that's been attacked like this man's family. Families are off limits.
Exactly.
You know, you fight dirty politics, but families are off limits. Nothing is off limits towards this man.
Yeah, I mean, and Michelle Obama, she takes so much from people. Like the one guy said she was eating ribs. Come on.
Yeah.
You know, I just think that in this situation, in this climate, people are angry. And it's understandable, because the unemployment rate, 9%. People are angry. People don't have money. People are losing their homes. People are losing their life savings. People are have no health care. But that's because of this. People sitting on their hands. And it has nothing to do with the man. Because I believe, that's the reason I had to start watching the news. I watched this man over and over do incredible things. And no one ever says what an incredible thing that was. They always look at the lesser thing and then blame him for things that no one has control over. I mean, in all of the countries outside of the United States that are always at war with each other, and there are a lot of them, they've been at war since the beginning of time. And every president has done something or made a move, but I've never heard anyone get criticized for every move they make. If he was not fast enough, he was too quick. But this person, if I was him, I'd just take my toys and go home. I'd have been done a long time ago.
And you see, that's what I admire about President Obama, is that despite all the challenges, despite all the, setbacks and, the negative encounters that he experiences, he still presses on. He knows that he was elected, he has a job to do, and he created this vision for America, and he's holding on to that vision no matter what, and he's going to do everything he can. I mean, this is why we live in a democratic society, and, in a democratic society, we have a Congress, and, in order to get things done, we have to work together. Things move a bit slower than we would like to see, but he's not a dictator. He can't just go in and get it done himself. And so I admire his tenacity. I admire his strength. I admire his coolness. Despite all of the chaos and the ruckus that is going around him, he does not lose his cool. He's even keeled. He's even tempered. And so, I look at him and, I think about myself, because it's like, I want to be, like that. I don't want to be zigzagging all over, the scale. I want to be even tempered, despite what the appearance looks on the outside, knowing the truth inside, going within. you know, a lot of times I'm told that I'm quiet, sometimes too quiet. It's part of my personality, and I do a lot of reflection. So it's taking that time to go within, and instead of reacting to something, I want to respond to it, and respond in a way that, you know, I could still be myself and still be in truth, where I'm not going to allow someone else to control me and pull myself down to their level and start bickering back and forth. And I think that's what President Obama demonstrates. Despite all of that, he doesn't go down to that petty level. You know, he still is laser focused, and that's how I want to be, laser focused in the job that I need to get done.
That's one of the reasons I like to be around you and Carl, is because Ernestine always told me, you got to stop letting other people take your joy. And I do. Because like you, I don't watch television in the evening because the news is on it. It makes me angry.
Right.
And my joy slips away from me real easy. And you and Jennifer had that calming effect, you know, and I've never seen either one of you come in here, you know, with your head down and not with a smile on your face. And I know there are some times that you might even feel like doing that, but you don't let that get into your spirit. And I'm trying to learn that. You know, even at 82 years old, I'm still learning, you know. I'm a progress in work.
Aren't we all?
At all times. And, you know, just like with the president, like you said, his sense of cool, that really is inspiration to me all the time. Because I think that is that's the way I want to show up. And my favorite thing that he said is I would rather be a very effective one-term president than be a lame duck, you know, two-term president. And I believe that in life. Anything that I do, I'm going to do it to the fullest. And when it's time to pack up my toys and go home, I'm happy. I'm like, here's the bag, here's my toys. You can have the White House, you know, and I'm out of there, because I would rather have gone in and done what I said I was going to do, or at least try my best to do, because, you know, like you said, no man works alone.
Yep.
But we have to really get in there for myself and realize that we also have to participate. Because most people sit in front of the television and they're like, well, that shouldn't have happened and that shouldn't have happened, but are you doing anything?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you making a difference?
Right. I think that when you see an injustice in your community, you need to get it with your community leaders and say, look, this happened and this is wrong. Whenever you see something wrong with the police department, if I see a police do something that's not just, I would get on the phone and call the police chief and say, look, I saw a policeman do something to someone that I know was unjust, and no matter what, I'm going to speak my mind. But I think until we start having the conversation, and that's the problem in this country, is we are so afraid of having the conversation. And the conversation is, we are all different. We were all born different, and that's why we're beautiful. We're beautiful because we're different. We experience on a higher level because you're different than I am and you're different than I am, and I experience both of you, and that's where I get my joy in the day. And realizing that joy isn't in every corner, but joy is all around us. And you get your choice. You get to either be very mindful and say, I'm going to surround myself with situations and people and places that bring me joy. And instead of looking at the television and letting that rule what I think, or let that rule how I feel about the day, because if you watch the news long enough, you can get just completely depressed.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, Carl, it's important to start having those conversations, having the discussions. If you see something that does bother you, taking the time to speak up. But it also even going one step further, and I find that so many times people are fighting against something. When you're fighting against something, you're going against the grain. It takes a lot of energy. And so, you know, one of the things that I hope to see more of is people starting to fight. I don't even want to say fight, but really advocating for something. So, for instance, you know, the obesity rate we know is just off the charts all over the United States. Instead of focusing on, you know, how obese people are, let's be pro-health. Let's, you know,
exactly.
okay, healthy living, a healthy lifestyle, and talk about being healthy and living your life in that way more on that side instead of fighting against being obese. Do you see the difference? And really starting to change the world in that respect. Like Mother Teresa once said, she was invited to an anti-war rally, and she said, "No, I'm not going, but if you invite me to a pro-peace rally, I'll be there." And I just think that is such a strong message that she sent all across the world.
Yeah. And we don't have to be world beaters. As you say, we can start right in our community.
Right.
Do something in our community. I always think about Gandhi. One step.
One step.
One step changed India. He put his foot on a road that says, you're not good enough to step here. He did, and the whole of India changed. Martin Luther King, and I'm sure the man knew that at some point he was going to be killed. I believe he knew that. But he did it anyway. Because he wanted to make a difference. He was chosen, he was called to make a difference, and he answered. And that's the main thing. We can hear the call, but we choose not to answer. The whole thing is to answer. Do something, make a difference.
Well, I'm going to have to close out here. I'm thanking you for being here because you've both been absolutely wonderful. And I want to read a quote because I really didn't want to mess it up. It said, "Prejudice is a burden that confuses the past, it threatens the future, and it renders the present inaccessible." And that's Maya Angelou. And it's so true because we can stop our own progress simply by not examining what we're thinking. And all I'm asking you to do is just stop and think about the reason why you just thought that. Because when you start to understand why you think the way you do, you'll change the way you think. Thank you for joining us. I hope you'll come in next week, and we have another exciting show for you, and we'll see you then. Have a good week.
Homophobia is like racism and anti-Semitism and other forms of bigotry in that it seeks to dehumanize a large group of people, to deny their humanity, their dignity, and personhood. Coretta Scott King.